What is up? So, this is going to be a different video. Usually on this channel, it's a lot of day in the life, a lot of vlogs, a lot of moving content, and then of course at the end, a period of time where I just yap about things on my mind. This video is intended to be informational and actually provide substantial amount of value, as opposed to just sometimes every now and then I'll say something that's somewhat meaningful. No, this video is like a guide essentially to hybrid athlete training. For those of you that don't know what a hybrid athlete is or what hybrid athlete training is, it's anything you want it to be. And that's the cool part about it, is there's no like set definition of you have to bench this much and run this fat. And like, no, it's like the way that I look at it, it's you take two different disciplines that don't necessarily complement each other directly and then dedicate different or varying amounts of effort to both in order to be exceptional at both. A lot of times the way that people view this is strength training and endurance training. There's been this kind of narrative in the past that you can't do both. So say focusing on developing your physique and developing strength, as well as improving your aerobic base and your just general pace with running. That's a hybrid athlete. Improving your swimming and your time in the pool, as well as improving your calisthenics. That's a hybrid athlete. You want to bike more and you want to do mixed martial arts more. Hybrid athlete. The definition itself is really flexible and it could be, like I said, anything you want it to be. But I'm gonna have this video be everything that I've learned in, I'd say I've been training like this for like 4 years now in total, like the kind of running and lifting combined, and then recently with adding back in swimming and cycling, and then the high rocks aerobic work with cross training. There's a lot of different variables, so I want this video to literally break down as much as I can about what I've learned thus far. I'm also going to have like little time slots. I'm gonna take a lot of time to edit this video, that's for sure. I have little time slots down low where you could see exactly where each section is talking about. So I'll have a swimming section, running, biking, lifting, cross training. It's all gonna be there, but I really want this video to just be as helpful as possible. If there's anything that I mess up or if there's anything that I miss, please feel free to correct me in the comments down below, drop it down below. I'm not here to spread misinformation. I'm literally just going to share my experience with training this way. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to talk about is just addressing the narrative that you can't lift and do substantial amounts of cardio. Essentially, what this comes down to is you should pick either strength training or endurance training and have that be the priority first, one of the two. For example, me with my life growing up playing sports that was more like fast-paced focused, it wasn't about necessarily developing my aerobic base, and then getting into lifting during COVID and then my first 2 years of college before I really got into running, my priority was developing strength and developing my physique. Now, that's not to say that you can't be doing the other, you can't be running during this period of time. It's just you have to scale it back in order for it to complement your lifting. Because if you say do that zone 2 easy running, which I'll address in the running section, what zone 2 is if you don't know what that is, it's the same as like incline treadmill walking or doing the Stairmaster. It's just cardio. If you use it to complement your strength training and developing your physique, is literally just to help further you be in a caloric deficit so that you are burning more calories, and if you're consuming enough protein, you're building muscle. That's just my individual experience. If you come from the opposite side of the spectrum, if you have that endurance background and you've been running competitively, you could still integrate in strength training, injury prevention, building more muscle, as well as like being able to produce more power with the muscle that you are building. Helps out. So that's what I will say is you want to start with one of the two. Start with either strength or start with either endurance, based on whatever your background is, totally up to you. And then slowly build up from there. And then once you feel like you're at a comfortable spot, either you hit your strength numbers, or you like the way that you're looking physically, or like the way that you're feeling, obviously, because it's all about performance, or like your running is at a point where you feel very comfortable with where you are, that's when you slowly integrate the other in a progressive overload manner. Now what a progressive overload is you start at, say, the number 2, and then all you're gonna do is add +1 and +1 and +1 And over time, you're gonna see a gradual increase. If you're lifting 5 days a week and you feel comfortable with that number, then you slowly start to add in that running or increase the running that you're doing. You don't do this massive jump where all of a sudden you go from a 10-mile week to a 40-mile week. You go a 10-mile week to a 12-mile week, and then a 15-mile week, and then slowly progress up. Similarly, if you have been running for a decent amount of time and are comfortable with your aerobic base and where your fitness is at, and you want to integrate it in lifting, you don't just go right to a 6-day split, push-pull legs, maxing out on everything. No, you start out with 3 days of lifting a week, and then move up to 4, and then you move up to the comfortable number that you feel like is still going to help you, not inhibit your performance. That's the thing, is once we start to implement in these other training disciplines, we don't want to see any like falling off. It's not just like, okay, like now that I have a physique, I'm going to stop caring about strength training and only start running, because then it's just like you lose that balance. The whole name of the game with hybrid training is balance. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's start off with, I'm gonna go just like what I know best. So I'm gonna start off with strength training. We'll do strength training, and then I'll do cross training, because those are two different things, kind of the same thing. Cross training is essentially just like you're integrating in a different discipline or different form of exercise that once again is complementing what you are working towards. To me, in my eyes, when I say cross training, I'm thinking about like that high rock circuit workouts, because those don't necessarily stem directly into either my goals of building strength or, you know, becoming a better triathlete, but it does prove benefits. So let's start off with weightlifting. And as I said, this is just my opinion with everything. It can vary based on your individual needs, whether it be injuries or where you're at in your life right now with your training. But this is just my opinion about training. When I'm structuring out my training split, I always make sure I include a compound lift. And what that compound lift is either squat, bench, deadlift, or recently, which I've also been adding in, is shoulder press. Shoulder press is a little bit of an exception, but referring to squat, bench, and deadlift, these are full body lifts, whether you believe it or not. You're getting activation of a number of different muscle groups at the same time, which is why these are like compound. It's a gathering of multiple different muscle groups to produce force in order to lift the weight. Now, when it comes to training these compound lifts, I like to, especially at this point in time, target strength with them. So essentially what that means is I'm working in the 3 to 5 rep range. I'm working with 85 to 100% of my current 1 rep max, and I'm doing it I do like just one top set because that's what I prefer, and I feel like it's like, okay, I'm dedicating the most amount of effort to this top set, because if I can do it for 3 sets, then it's not the most amount of effort. If you're trying to develop your physique a little bit more and you care more about just the pure idea of building muscle mass, then maybe working with hypertrophy training, which hypertrophy is, I believe it's 6 to 12 reps of 75 to 80% of your 1 rep, or I think it's 70 to 85% of your 1 rep max for 3 to 5 sets. Like I said, with lifting not necessarily being my number 1 priority right now, but still being something that I very much so like to do, I am just focused on maintaining my strength in that realm right now. Then when it comes to accessory lifts, which are additional lifts that isolate specific muscle groups, those are where you work more so hypertrophy, because that's when you can really focus on developing like targeted muscle groups. You have muscle group focuses, so it's just like, okay, I can do more reps, I can do more sets for right here, because this is what I'm trying to target. There's a number of different splits that you can do. You can do a push-pull leg split, where a push day is chest, tris, and shoulders, a pull day is back and bis, and a leg day is a leg day. The Arnold split, which is chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs. You could do a chest, arms, back, shoulders, like obviously there's variability with it. But for me right now, what I've been enjoying is I've been doing full body lifts, which people might attack me for it. I don't really care. I started out with one of those compound lifts, like I said, and then I will do 1 accessory lift in the hypertrophy training range per muscle group. So say I'm starting out with barbell bench press. I bench, and then I'll go into a back exercise, either a lat focus or a mid and upper back focus, cycle by the day. I'll go into a leg focus, either quad or hamstring focus, cycle by the day. When I say cycle by the day, it's like I have 4 days a week of lifting. So 2 of the days are gonna be quad focus, and then the other 2 days are going to be hamstring focus. I don't know Similarly for the back, 2 are gonna be lat focused, 2 are gonna be mid and upper back focused. You got biceps, you got triceps, you got shoulders. Shoulders, it varies a little bit because your shoulder has 3 different heads. There's the anterior head, the medial head, and the posterior head. So front delt, side delt, rear delt. If I'm doing a pushing compound lift, such as barbell bench press or seated dumbbell shoulder press, I'll move away from targeting the anterior head and focus more on the medial or the posterior head. There's a delt, medial delt, posterior delt. It's one of the two, but like it's your shoulder. For biceps, it's either working that short head where you're working in like kind of a limited range of motion. You want to think like you want to have your arm in front of you and you're curling from like right there. Or you can work your long head, which is in which your bicep is behind you and you're getting that kind of deficit pull. Similarly with tricep, you can either be extending frontwards or be extending overhead. And then like I said, this would be on the day that I'm doing barbell bench press, so that is my chest exercise for the day. However, say it was like a squat day or a deadlift day, then I would either do 1 chest exercise for my upper chest or 1 chest exercise for my mid or lower chest, similar to the back and the legs, 2 per week, and then you cycle by the day. That's my current lifting split. If you would like to emulate that, sick. If you would like to critique it, go right ahead, feel free to. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is you should have that balance between strength focus and hypertrophy focus. You don't want to only be working in hypertrophy because like it's going to just take longer to build strength. You don't want to only be building in strength because that's more so taxing to like your body and your central nervous system. So if you're literally doing 3 heavy reps of every single exercise, you're going to be a lot more sore, a lot more often. So just be smart with that. Like we said, the name of the game is progressive overload. So progressive overload for strength, if you do a weight for 5 reps, 1 week, the next week you should add 5 pounds and try and do that same rep for 5 weeks, or same weight for the same reps of 5 reps. And then if you can hit it, great, go up another 5 pounds. If you can't, stay there until you can hit that for 5 reps. For our accessory lifts where we're working hypertrophy, have a weight that you can do 3x6. And the next week try and do 3x8, 3x12. And then once you get to that 3x12, go back down to 3x6, go up in weight. Very easy, very methodical. Progressive overload for strength training. And then last but not least, to close out the strength training portion of this video, I want to just hit on the equipment that I use and that I find beneficial. You have wrist straps, which help provide wrist support so that you can increase your pressing strength. You have a lifting belt, which helps brace your core and provide you with external back support so that you're able to kind of correct your posture. And then you have knee sleeves, which are able to kind of increase tension around your legs so that when you do get into that bent down position, there's more potential energy stored up, which is a stored energy, so that as you do start to press upwards, driving through the ground and straightening out your knee, there's more power that like just helps you straighten out. None of these are necessary in order to strength train. They are just both complementary to the strength training. They're gonna help you out, as well as just kind of proactive with injury prevention. If you have these external support systems, it is less likely that you'll get injured if you're utilizing correct form. Less likely, because there is still always the possibility of getting injured, which is why the overall lesson with strength training, or like one of the big ones, is always prioritize form, not necessarily the weight or the number that you're doing. All right, the second last part of the strength training portion of this video, I'll keep it somewhat short, going over cross training. So cross training, like I said, is any type of training that falls outside of that specific strength or specific endurance category. For me, what I prioritize is yoga, call me crazy, mobility. I think that's just super helpful when it comes to keeping your body right, increasing flexibility, strengthening joints. Very helpful. I like yoga a lot. So that's one of them. And the second, as I mentioned, is these high rocks circuit workouts, which in the continuous movement that you're doing while you're doing some of these like strength intense exercises such as farmer's carries or sled pushes or sandbag lunges, you also have these continuous aerobic exercises such as the ski erg, the row erg, or like the assault bike. I think in this category you could also probably put like calisthenic works, where it's body weight work, don't get me wrong, so you are increasing strength, but it isn't necessarily so taxing to your body that you're going to be extremely sore the next day because of the amount of calisthenic work that you've done. Right now, my total split for strength and cross training is I will do 4 days a week of lifting, full body lifts with the 4 compound lifts to start each. I will do 2 days a week of high rock circuit workouts, and then I'll do 1 day a week of hot yoga. That's what works best for me. I enjoy it very much. That's pretty much everything with the strength portion of this video. If I missed anything in particular, please feel free to let me know. I just wanted to kind of outline everything on a very basic level, but I'm gonna go lift myself right now, and then when I come back, we'll talk about the endurance aspect of things with running, swimming, and biking. As you can see, been a little bit of time. Now it's completely dark out. Now we get to the fun part of the video, which I think more people are gonna enjoy. We get to the endurance side of things. And now I'm going to try my best as a non-endurance athlete to explain my take on endurance. And when I say I'm not an endurance athlete, I mean like, I didn't grow up running cross country or anything like that. I learned to run by just kind of like trial and error. Similar with lifting, like you just trial and error in the gym, see what works for you. That was the case with me in running. I just kind of would go out and run a 5K as fast as I can and see if that would help out. And I did that for a little too long. Didn't really provide me with any progress. So now I'm gonna explain how I got better at running without having a necessarily background in running. So my take on running is that there's 3 different phases. And the first phase is base building. Essentially, the only thing you're worried about in this phase right now is developing your aerobic base through zone 2 running. Zone 2 running is essentially running at a comfortable and conversational pace, something that you can hold, something that after you finish your run, you shouldn't be like gasping for air. It should be a pace that makes you feel like refreshed after that run. If you don't have a heart rate monitor or a smartwatch to track this, I would say operate off of perceived effort. So like we just talked about, it should be a pace that you feel like you could have a consistent conversation at without having to really gasp for air. If you do have a smartwatch or a heart rate monitor, the way in which you can calculate this is either by going off the Maftone 180 method, which you do 180 minus your age, and that'll kind of give you like the max heart rate you should be operating in that zone 2 threshold. Or, you know, depending on what brand you have, a Garmin or a Coros or an Apple Watch, it should actually give you heart rate thresholds based on your estimated like max heart rate. But essentially in this phase 1, in this aerobic base building phase, your only priority is getting more time on your feet. You're not necessarily worried about distance, you're not necessarily worried about pacing. The only 2 things you should really be thinking about is perceived effort and time of running. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw up just an example progression chart right here. As you're seeing, is every other week you are running for slightly longer. And the reason why I'm saying every other week is because you're incorporating in that deload week, which as time goes on, you should be attempting to run slightly farther in that same period of time than you did in the 2 weeks prior. But essentially, we're just trying our best to get good at running easier for longer, because the name of the game when it comes to improving your running is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's so frustrating because you want to get right into ripping sub 6 minute miles. Trust me, I am the same way. But you just have to realize you have to build your aerobic base, which is your ability to keep your heart rate, therefore your perceived effort, at a lower level for an extended period of time. The more you are able to develop your aerobic base, the more you are able to run for longer or run for faster at a lower perceived effort. Therefore, you are going to be able to continue to progress in your running. Similarly, as you saw in that chart, it's following that simple progressive overload, which we talked about in lifting. We aren't making these massive jumps in the amount of time we're running for. It's incremental progressions over time. Now we get into phase 2 of running, which I will call like picking it up or something. And I'll show what phase 2 consists of right here. It consists of tempo runs and long runs. So now that we have our aerobic base, our focus becomes, okay, how can we run faster and how can we run longer? Within your tempo runs, it's not necessarily sprint work. However, it's increasing the perceived effort for periods of times during your run. Going back to what I said, if you have a smartwatch or a heart rate monitor, this is when we'd start operating outside of zone 2 into zone 3 and maybe a little of low zone 4. If you don't have a heart rate monitor or a smartwatch, then this is where we go from, instead of being able to run at a consistent conversational pace, to a pace where you're still able to talk, you're still able to communicate what's going on. However, it's not as fluid. You find yourself having to gather yourself at times, but it's not an all-out sprint in which you can't talk at all or you feel like really taxed. I would recommend, if you are doing any type of workout that involves increasing pacing in the middle of it, you should always include a warm-up and a cool-down. Warm-up makes sure that like your legs are actually warmed up before getting right into intense efforts so that you don't pull anything or hurt yourself. And then the cool-down mile, I think, is a tad bit of a mental thing as well as a physical thing. Obviously, being able to get your heart rate down, that is super important just for making sure that our body gets back in check. But it's also mental. It's just like you did all the hard work already, and now you just push a little farther with an easy mile or easy 2 miles, whatever your cooldown consists of. It's like, okay, like I still can work even when I'm tired after a whole workout. So that's a tempo run. For the long run, this could be done one of two ways. We either extend the amount of time that we're running in zone 2, which I think is like what most people should start out doing. Once you get comfortable with your tempo runs, you can then integrate some tempo intervals into a long run. So you just increase the length of the run, and then you'll throw in some faster miles in between there. It's also important to note that in any of these zone 2 workouts, if you need to stop for a period of time to walk to lower your heart rate, absolutely do it. There are so many runs, especially running here in Texas, where I'm just like, okay, after every mile, I'm gonna walk for 30 seconds to lower my heart rate. So helpful, because the name of the game is keeping the perceived effort low. So you want to be able to incorporate in any type of method that helps you do so. And then phase 3 of running, we introduce track workouts and incline or elevation gain runs. Track workouts are where we focus on something called red lighting, which is more of a focus on our anaerobic effort. Essentially, this is where we push into that zone 4. This is where you are running at a pace that you can't necessarily hold at an extended period of time yet, but you want to get that heart rate going. You want to really test your legs, test the amount of power that you're producing. This is what a track workout is for. At that high zone 3, low zone 4 threshold, so it shouldn't necessarily be an all-out sprint, but it should be a hard effort run. Track workouts are super important for developing and increasing your VO2 max, which is essentially how many, maybe it's milliliters of oxygen you're able to intake at a period of time, or how much oxygen you're able to derive from air in order to utilize to keep lactate levels low. Lactate levels are essentially like a buildup of soreness or fatigue in your muscles. You have a higher VO2 max, you're gonna be able to run faster for longer. That's essentially like the most objective measurement of fitness. And then incline and hill runs or elevation gain runs, this is where it's more of a focus on muscular endurance. Obviously, the perceived effort is going to increase while the pace might decrease when doing these hill workouts. You really got to push on this. This is also very important for that anaerobic effect in developing our VO2 max. These are probably the hardest type of workouts, but oftentimes they are the most important type. These two workouts are much more harder effort workouts, which is why it takes the longest to build up to them. It shouldn't necessarily be, yeah, you know, my first week of running, I'm gonna go hit 400 meter repeats on the track. You gotta work up to it. You gotta develop your aerobic base first, then you gotta be able to develop that kind of lactate threshold running of like, okay, I'm running at a harder effort for longer periods of time, and then you get into the more so pick up the pace, work your ass off efforts in these two workouts. When it comes to running equipment, I think the most important thing would be a smartwatch, which I use a Garmin Forerunner 255 as of right now. This is just super helpful when it comes to tracking your pace, tracking your heart rate, tracking how far you run. It's pretty helpful. Obviously, if you can't get a hold of that, there are apps on your phone, like I know Strava or the Nike Run Club, which will track your distance while you're running. The only reason why I'd recommend getting either a smartwatch or even a heart rate monitor is because, as we talked about a lot, getting used to and improving your running is all about being able to control your perceived effort for periods of time, for that continuous duration of the exercise. So having some type of machinery be able to provide you with estimates while you are in the middle of the act just facilitates the amount of like brain power it takes to understand how hard you're working, because you don't want to always be like thinking back and forth, is this a conversational pace, should I go easier, should I go slower? Having just like equipment, it just helps out. Heart rate monitor is a slightly more accurate estimation of what your current heart rate is due to the fact that it is like it's location on your body. Whereas with a smartwatch, due to just the increase in movement during your arm swing of running, your radial pulse may not be always the most accurate estimation of what your heart rate is at the time, but it is still got like a heart rate sensor, so it is still an estimate of what you're doing. And then the big thing with shoes and running, you don't need to go and buy yourself a $400 pair of carbon plated running shoes. Obviously those are going to make you faster, but those should be used in moderation because one, shoes are expensive. 2, they don't last for long if they're carbon plated. And 3, if you're always running in carbon plated shoes, there's no competitive advantage when you do use them for a race because you're always used to having that effect with running. You know what I'm saying? Go to a local running store, get your individual foot checked by a professional and hear what they have to recommend, because everyone is different, everybody is different, every body is different. So having a professional be able to tell you in person, hey, this is what works for your arch or your feet, that's the name of the game. You should do that for finding what shoes are best for you. Now that we have touched on the basics of running and improving running, let's get into our next discipline, which is cycling. Once again, just different time, different day entirely of when I'm recording this. Now, when it comes to biking, this is probably the area that I'm like the least versed in. Yeah, that works. In regards to running, I've done 3 marathons, an ultra, a half and full Ironman now, so I kind of have that background. I grew up a competitive swimmer, but with cycling, it definitely was a lot of learning lessons. So I'm going to give you all the advice that I wish I could have learned before I started biking, because I made some stupid mistakes going forward. But yeah, let's get into it. First up, when it comes to purchasing a bike or getting a bike, similar to the shoes, I think going to a bike shop and talking to a professional, that definitely helps out. If you have a friend who's used bikes before, getting their opinion, just getting the opinion of someone else who knows more about the subject than you. I don't know bikes that well. I literally have 2 bikes. One is mine and one is Nick's. Both are Cervelos. Cervelo is a good brand. I know there's brands like Canyon, Specialized, BMC, Trek. There's a ton out there. So definitely do your research. Definitely talk to an individual that knows more than you about the subject. And then additionally, Facebook Marketplace. Like find it for, you don't need to buy a brand new bike. There are plenty going around, I'm sure, for a much more reasonable price. So yeah, getting the bike is the first thing. And if you are in a position where you can't necessarily buy a bike right now, totally all good. I used the stationary bike for like my first month of Ironman training because I didn't have a bike yet. It sucks, don't get me wrong, but you can still kind of get just that flow of, okay, I'm gonna be sitting on a seat pedaling for an extended period of time. That's kind of like the mental cue, the mental barrier that you have to overcome with cycling. All right, you have a bike. Now let's talk about workouts. There are 2 different ways to do cycling workouts, and that is either outdoors or inside on a trainer. A trainer is essentially something that you can attach your bike to, turning it into an at-home stationary bike. There are a number of different types of trainers. I use a Wahoo Kicker Snap. Anything Wahoo related has Bluetooth connection. The reason why Bluetooth is important is because you can download a software called Zwift. Zwift is an online biking app which will help you, it provides you with courses, provides you with workouts, and it just gives you like a simulation as if you are riding outside but you're riding inside. Obviously I understand that not everyone can purchase a trainer, but similar to the heart rate and running, the trainer really helps you get down power output with cycling. Power output is essentially how much power your legs producing, thus how fast you are riding. In order to increase your pace in running, you have to run harder in that moment. In order to increase your speed on the bike, you have to pedal harder in that moment. Having a trainer makes it easier to regulate the amount of power that you are producing, especially if you have Zwift and you can, incorporate in some workouts that will just kind of keep the trainer will do the work for you. It'll provide the resistance needed in order for you to maintain certain power thresholds. So I'm a big fan of using a trainer when it comes to targeting specific power intervals that I'm doing, but at the same time, I totally understand if trainer's not in the picture for everyone. That's the idea of I'm gonna go over the power zones right now. And we're gonna use the power zones as our perceived effort indicator, similar that we used heart rate for perceived effort indicator with running. Your first zone is zone 1, and it's super easy. It's active recovery. It's not even like we didn't even talk about zone 1 running because it's the same one as like zone 1 biking. It's not necessarily like you're gonna see any benefit or improvement when working the zone. It's just more so to kind of get blood flow going. It's active recovery. That's like the best way to put it. So that's zone 1. Zone 2 above that is our endurance power zone, and this is essentially just building endurance. This is the idea of, okay, if we're operating in zone 2, similar with running, we're developing our aerobic base. That's really what it comes down to. It's quite similar. As you can see, these are aligning quite well. Where zone 1 is the easiest, active recovery base. Zone 2, developing the aerobic base, increasing our endurance, increasing our fitness so that we can continue to persist. This is what I would say would be that conversational pace. Obviously with biking it's a little different because like very rarely are you gonna get to a point where you're like all out biking that you can't even say a word. Conversational pace, easy effort, not like super easy like zone 1, but easy effort. This is essentially our aerobic work. We're developing our aerobic base here. Then we get into zone 3, which is more like intensive aerobic work. I would say this is probably like low zone 3 heart rate type deal. You can hold this pace for well over an hour in the cycling world, but you're not easily talking. You know, this is where like we actually start to do the work. This is where after a ride at this kind of zone 3 power spot, you're feeling it a little bit. It's not necessarily like you get off the bike and feel refreshed like a zone 2 ride, but you aren't dead from it. Then we get to zone 4, which I would say this is probably like high zone 3 for heart rate. This is our lactate threshold. It hurts and it's uncomfortably comfortable. You know, it's like you aren't dying holding it, but you're gonna be sweating, you're gonna be working holding it, it's gonna be taxing on your body. Then we get into power zone number 5, and this is for VO2 max work. This is not sustainable. This is the idea of like, if you're trying to pass someone and you gotta gun it past them, you probably hop up to here for a period of time and then drop down. VO2 max work, similar to like what we were talking about with like track repeats and running, they're hard efforts. They're gonna be taxing, and it's at a pace that you can't necessarily hold at race pace yet. Then we get into power zone number 6, which is all about your anaerobic capacity. This is a sprint. You're pushing really hard here, and you're just trying to get your body used to being able to work when oxygen isn't as available, hence anaerobic. You're struggling to hold this pace for even a minute, essentially. And then the last power zone number 7, is neuromuscular. This is an all-out sprint. This is max effort. You can hold this for maybe 10 seconds. Depending on the type of riding that you're doing, a lot of it will be in that zone 2 through zone 5. Never like a lot of zone 6, but could be incorporated in there. Very rarely is zone 7 ever incorporated into a workout itself. And then zone 1 is what you'd operate in for active recovery, a recovery spin, flushing your legs out. And then aside from the trainer, there is a whole bunch of cycling gear. So I'm gonna real quick just run you through, give you my opinion as to what I think is important, what I think is necessary. First up, number 1 most important thing, non-negotiable, a helmet. I don't care if you don't think it looks cool. What's not cool is dying from falling off your bike and then you're at. So wear a helmet. Don't be a loser. Second up, a bike computer. So this is the Garmin Edge 130. Essentially what this is it's like a speedometer. You put it on your bike, it'll show your average speed, it'll show how long you've been riding for, the distance you've been covering. If you have a heart rate monitor, it can connect to that. If you have a power meter, which we'll talk about in a second, it also connects to that. Extremely helpful if you're doing a lot of outdoor riding. Then we have cycling shoes and cleats. This is essentially clipping into a bike, what it's used for. It makes it more comfortable to ride the bike because like your foot's locked in place. You don't have to worry about slipping over the pedal, especially if you are doing like intense efforts and trying to pick up. I do also believe that it helps you bike faster because when you're biking, a tip that I learned is that you don't want to have like your foot at an angle pushing down the pedal. You want to have it be horizontal or parallel with the pedal, and think about sliding forwards and backwards. This helps put less pressure on your knee when you are pedaling or doing like those hard efforts, and it helps you just kind of have a smoother ride, because when you're thinking about it, when you're riding, you're riding forwards, you're not pushing down, so you want to be like gliding forwards. Then we got chain lube. You want to lube up your chain probably like every other ride. So essentially this just facilitates the shifting of gears when you are riding. Bike pump, check your tires every single time to make sure that they aren't like getting deflated, because sometimes even just having them around deflates them. So pump your tires. And then I can't show you because it's on the bike itself, but a power meter attaches to your pedal, and similar to the Garmin Edge 130, it is a kind of real time tell of how much power you're producing, as well as the rotations per minute of your tire. And then to close out cycling, just a rule of thumb with RPM, because I didn't talk about that before, rotations per minute, it's how many times you are rotating your legs per minute. When you're riding on a flat surface, you want to be shooting for 75 to 80. When you're on an incline, you want to be shooting for 85 to 90. So you want to shift gears to a lighter gear, something that you can facilitate and hold for longer. This just helps to increase blood flow, especially like if you're doing an incline and you're in too low of a gear. It's just gonna be a lot of stress on your legs because it's gonna be harder to get those rotations going. So just something to keep in mind. Now we can get on to the last part of the video, which is swimming. This video is gonna be so long. I don't care. I'm trying to give as much advice as possible. So last thing I'm gonna cover is swimming. I realize I just don't have enough time to talk about nutrition in this video. So if you want a part 2 for that, let me know. When it comes to swimming, in addition with biking as well, everything endurance-wise, it all starts with building your base. So going easy and slowly, incrementally progressing how long you are doing that easy pace for is the name of the game to start. Especially with swimming, which I feel like a lot of people are the least familiar with, at least in a competitive manner, such as in a sport. You really have to take your time with it and learn correct form. Like I said, with biking, if you want to bike faster in the moment, you pedal harder. If you want to run faster in the moment, you run harder. If you want to swim faster in the moment, you gotta perfect your form, not just like flail your arms as hard as you can. So I'm going to show a lot of swim equipment just right off the bat because I feel like that's the best way to fix your form. The first piece of equipment, and I think the most important, is a pull buoy. This essentially just goes right between your legs and it helps your lower body stay afloat in the water. As a result, you don't have to worry about kicking. You just can think about the continuous strokes of your arm. Now, with using a pull buoy and it icing your upper body and forcing a focus on just the pulling mechanics, you want to think about a few things with your swimming. I'm going to throw up a video here of me swimming right now. Obviously my form isn't perfect, but I want to just point out a few things. The first being where my hands are entering the water. You want to have your hands enter the water almost as if you have an imaginary clock at 11 and 1 o'clock. You don't want to be crossing over every time that you are swimming because you got to think, when you pull down, you're pulling water into your chest, just creating more resistance. Whereas if you're at 11 and 1 right here, every time you pull, you're pulling towards your side and it's just propelling you through the water forward. Secondly, you want to think about your hand in the water. As soon as you kind of hit the water and reach out in front of you, you want to form a cup with your hand like that to cusp as much water as possible to pull as much past you. Think about it. If I'm like this, I can pull water, my hand's wide open, fully it's a lot of water is going to flow through. Which brings me to my next piece of equipment that's going to help us out with that hand motion in the water itself. Paddles. So this combo right here of pull buoy and paddles really helps to get our stroke down, our upper body propulsion through the water. Once you get good at using the paddles and you want to focus, okay, like make sure that my hand is not only entering the water right, because you don't want to be like always cupped entering the water because then it's going to like cause resistance. So you want to be relaxed as you stroke out, and then as soon as you are fully extended at that 11 or at that 1 o'clock, then you want to cup your hand and pull the water through. I know this is like a speed tutorial of how to swim. I'm sorry, I just want to get as much information in this video as possible. Now, for lower body equipment, the biggest recommendation I have are fins. Fins are going to make it so that you can kick a lot faster because you're able to catch more water with like the wider foot as opposed to just your normal foot. These will also help keep your lower body afloat because they're forcing you to get used to keeping your hips above the water. You don't want your lower body to sink where you're swimming like this. You want to almost be like parallel with the water itself. So using these to kick is going to help just keep your hips afloat and get you into that position of like, okay, this is how I should be swimming. This is how my body should feel in the water. It's important to note that like you don't have to be all out kicking with these. You should be kicking like normal because you're not going to be all out kicking. That's not the name of the game with swimming. It's more so just about a continuous flow through the water. If you are just like fully taxing your body and kicking too much, you're wasting energy. It's going to cause your legs to just get heavy and sink. So kick normal, but just use the fins to help propel you through the water faster. And then in addition to the fins, using a kickboard is super helpful as well because this takes like your entire upper body out of the picture. If you just want to like solely focusing on your lower body with swimming and staying afloat there, or like strengthening your hips through kicking, you use this kickboard, have it out like that, just fully extended, and you kick behind you. I will say another good use for a kickboard if you're struggling with that crossover like we talked about when you go to reach out and then you cross the midline of your body with your arm. A good drill that you can do is if you hold the kickboard out in front of you like here, I'm actually gonna go like this, and every time you pull, you just focus on getting your hand outside the kickboard. As you can see, if I'm just right here, this is 11 and 1 o'clock essentially. I'm not gonna cross over if I keep doing that. So that's a drill that I did like growing up to learn swimming. Like I said, I did grow up swimming, so I do have a little bit more of a background, but yeah. And then of course, goggles, swim cap. swim cap kind of reduces resistance in the water and it stops your hair from flowing everywhere by like kind of just keeping everything in check. Goggles help you see in the water. You definitely need goggles. And then real quick, going over just breathing mechanics. When you are breathing, you don't want to think about like lifting your head out of the water. Say like I'm swimming this way and like I go to breathe. I don't want to like lift up and out. You just want to have be like a slight rotation. You want like your head to stay at this kind of continuous point and you're just rotating left, rotating right. Think like blow out of your nose, inhale through your mouth. Hold that, let it fill your lungs. You want to fill your lungs. Your lungs are going to help you stay buoyant, so that's why it's super important to get a good breathing pattern down so that you don't start to sink or kind of like overexert yourself trying to stay afloat. And similarly with head position, you don't want to be head directly down. This is going to cause a lot of tension. You're going to be more so swimming lower. You don't want to be head entirely up. It's going to cause a lot of resistance right here. You want your head to be like, I don't know, is that 30 degrees? I'd say 30 degrees. You're gonna be able to see the bottom of the pool at like this angle, you know what I'm saying? The crown of your head should be right at the surface of the water level. Now, aside from the whole breathing thing, what makes swimming different from running and biking is that for most people, you won't necessarily be able to see your pace like mid-swim. And when I say most people, I know that there's like form goggles out there that display your pace while you're swimming. If you want to rock with those, absolutely do so. But a lot of swimming is like understanding perceived effort on your own, how different speeds feel in the water. And when it comes to rest times with swimming and like structuring your initial workouts, what I always recommend, kind of similar like with the running for time, is you're swimming for time. After every lap, stop for 10 seconds and then be like, okay, after every 2 laps, I'm going to stop for 20 seconds lap. The next time, every 2 laps, I'm going to stop for 15. Every 2 laps, I'm going to stop for 10. Once you get back to that 10, go up to every 3 laps, and then every 4 laps. It's incremental progressions over time. That's the name of the game with all of this. If you do too much, too fast, you're going to burn yourself out. It's not going to be nice. But yeah, that is a very brief, but also in-depth guide to hybrid athlete training. Shameless plug, I do have training plans and offer private coaching on my website down below. So if you want any like actual full-on workouts that have the lifting, the swimming, the running, the biking all incorporated, or just the lifting or just the swimming, running, biking, like it's all on there. So if you want to look at those, feel free to. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, if I got anything wrong, please feel free to drop it in the comments. Like I said, I'm not trying to spread misinformation. I'd love to be corrected by someone who knows more about the subject than me. And if you want me to do a video breaking down nutrition and all the important stuff that you need for training, feel free to let me know. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys very much so for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.